Good afternoon, Dr. Chairman of ISAS, and distinguished guests. Thank you for being here today. On behalf of the Institute of South Asian Studies, I would like to warmly welcome you to this afternoon's book launch of Islam and Society, Sociological Explorations, and the following panel discussion. To start off, it is my pleasure to invite Ambassador Pillai, Chairman of ISAS, to deliver the opening remarks.
Dr. Riaz Hassan, High Commissioner to Sri Lanka, David Burki, and all my distinguished friends. I'm indeed very honored to be here and to launch a book on which I know very little. But that's how things start. You know, when you have very little knowledge, you keep a fairly open mind, I guess. I'm not going to talk about the book, and that I leave to Iftikhar and David and others to discuss the panel. What I wanted to say, very short, is basically, being an old man, I've seen how history evolves, and how from my childhood to today, Islam seems to have changed a little bit. You know, or part of Islam seems to have changed. I don't think it's Islam that has changed. It's the practitioners have become a little different. When I was a kid, I was born in Singapore, but the Second World War, I spent in an idyllic childhood with my maternal grandfather in Kerala. My grandfather was fairly well off, and he was a very good chess player, and he went around, you know, playing with different people, different parts of Kerala. And then once he told me the best players that he played with are all Muslims. I don't know why he thought so, but because of this, some of these players would come to the house. My grandfather, I suppose part of the times, was somewhat of a feudal and a very caste-conscious person. So in the front porch, there's only one chair, and that was for him to sit. And all visitors stood outside. Except I found that the Muslim visitors could sit on the porch, on the floor. So I used to think that they are little, what in Malay we call atas, you know, little higher-ups. That was my first contact, or little acquaintance with Islam and Muslims. My second one was during my undergraduate days at the university. I was very active in some section of the of student politics. There was a very active socialist club, and I was a member. I later became president, and I took a lot of trouble to try and read an impossible task, and that is to read Das Kapital. And I was very troubled by Karl Marx's dictum that religion was the opium of the people. Because I was always brought up to fear God and to believe in God. So there was a very prominent trade union leader in Singapore with whom I was very friendly, and he acted almost like a mentor for me. I went to see him and I said, this troubles me, you know, I'd like to be a Marxist, I'm a socialist, but I cannot accept that God is evil or religion is evil. And we discussed religion and politics for a little while. And something he said was very, very revealing to me. And that was this, that he said, you should read about all religions, not just that you're a Hindu, you read about Hindu Puranas or Hindu, you know, texts. Read about everything. And he said, you will find that actually Islam is the religion closest to socialism. It's a very egalitarian religion. It is a modern religion. It's not based on superstition or anything. It is this. And I think Riaz refers to this modernity in his book. So that was the second. The third one, of course, was when I became ambassador to Iran. And I was very fond of translated versions of Persian poetry. And one of the poems I read was by Ferdowsi, the Song of God, the Song of Kings. And there's one line, one verse, which shocked me. And I felt that Muslims would be outraged by that. And that was, it meant something like this. I hate my life. I hate my fate. I hate this country. And I hate the Arabs who made me a Muslim. So I asked my Iranian friends, well, how would you accept this? I say, why not? It's not poet trying to say that religion or Islam is bad. He's just showing the frustration of a defeated general, talking about his fate and the reason. These three stories that I told you, the 3 episodes I told you, was basically left an impression in my mind of Islam being a very tolerant, egalitarian, modern religion. Then, as things passed, I'm not sure, I'm not a historian, but I'm not sure where the date comes. Was it Palestinian problems? Was it something else? But somewhere radicalism came into Islam. And this has troubled me always, because the Muslims that I deal with, I talk to, I hear, they're such reasonable, such scholarly people. Even the way the Ayatollah is chosen in Iran, for instance, through the knowledge of jurisprudence. And when Khomeini died, they told me that Khomeini took over was not the most senior Ayatollah, because Ayatollah Sistani in Iraq was much better qualified. So it was based on very objective assessments and evaluation of their work, their knowledge, and that's how it is. Which is a little different from religious people in some of the other religions, including my own. So I was very impressed, but I'm troubled by the radicalism in Islam. And that is why I feel books like the one that Riaz has written is very, very useful, because it helps us to understand Islam as it is. Here, I want to also tell you, I have a selfish interest in wanting to say a few words at this forum, because I'm associated with the Institute of South Asian Studies. And we are setting up an endowment fund. And one of the things, I've spoken to the director, I've spoken to Dr. Nassim, who's the director of ISAS, to say that I need $2.5 million to set up a chair on Islam in South Asia. Islam in South Asia is very important because there are more than 500 million Muslims in South Asia. And somebody should do detailed study on this. And if I had this money, I can, through the university, set up a chair on Islam and South Asia. So I'm hoping that you'll pass the word around. People like my friend Sheikh Munir may underwrite the whole thing, but if he doesn't, others should be able to do it. The other thing I have is that you may have heard in the papers that Singapore is going to have an Indian Heritage Center. I'm associated with it. Now, here the word Indian is not India as it is now, but more the Indian subcontinent. The India that was there before. In other words, everything that the Persians call the Hindustan, or the east of Indus River, that is where we are looking at. And we are getting artifacts from various places all over Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and so on. There is one piece of artifact which I'm very fond of, but very expensive. And that is a very intricate mosaic work, which is a facade of the Multan Gate of a mosque. It's beautiful. And I've only seen the pictures and some video on it. And it costs $1.2 million. I'm sorry, I'm bringing it all in dollars and cents, but I've got an axe to grind, or I have something, 1.2 million. The Singapore government has been very kind and said that they will give us 600,000. So I had to raise another 600,000. Otherwise, I may not have this artifact in this Indian Heritage Center. So I thought I'd leave those thoughts with you. I wish Riaz well. I think his other book, The Soul of a Muslim, I thought it was highly readable, a very good book, gave me some knowledge, and I am hoping that he will write many more, and that will be useful for the reader. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Pillai. May I now invite Professor Riaz Hassan, author of Islam and Society, Sociological Exploration, to give us an introduction on his book.
Thank you very much for your presence and for your comments. I think I'd like to begin by acknowledging that this book would not have been possible without the support and interest of ISAS. And I want to express my warmest thanks to the Institute, to Mr. Pillai, to Ambassador Pillai, Professor Tantai Long and Johnson Paul, whose own ways has been very instrumental in getting some of the things done which needed to be done in order to get the book out. I'm also very grateful to some of my ISAS colleagues who read some of the chapters and commented on them. I don't think they all agreed with me, but some of them, in fact, discouraged me from publishing it. But in any case, I would like to thank particularly Shahid Jubair Burki, Dr. Iftihar Ahmed Chaudhry, Dr. Riaz Hassan, who read some bits of some of the chapters. And I also want to thank a friend, Professor Muhammad Khalid Masood, who was former chairman of Pakistan Islamic Ideology Council, who gave very useful comments on some parts of the book and also said to me to be very careful when I publish it. And to Professor Robert Goldney, a very dear friend who's professor of psychiatry at the University of Adelaide, because it was with him that I have discussed perhaps one of the most seminal concepts that I use in the book, the autochthonous thought. And I'm very grateful. He's not here, but I'd just like to acknowledge his many discussions I've had with him in Adelaide. I'm also very thankful to my publisher, Melbourne University Press, especially the commissioning editor, Professor Shah Rahmat Bazadeh, and the executive publisher, Sally Heath, and the editors, Diane Lehman, Lily Key, and Christian Smith. I'm mentioning it because writing a book is a fairly lonely exercise, but after you have written, you have to rely on so many people to make it possible to see it in print. And I think all these people have been very instrumental in getting the book, like any book, out in print. Before giving a very brief introduction to the, the main ideas of the books, I'd like to just develop some of the ideas that Ambassador Pillai has mentioned. When I came here, my main interest in coming to the Institute was to work on South Asian Islam. And the reason for that was that Southeast Asian Islam is in fact very well covered at the University in Singapore. ISAS and ARI does a very good job. Middle Eastern Islam is covered very well by the Institute of Middle Eastern Studies. But South Asian Islam is relatively left out in the academic and intellectual discourse at the university. Now, why should we be interested in South Asian Islam? As Ambassador Pillai said, about 1/3 of all Muslims live in South Asia. I mean, to give you some statistics, there are 1.6 billion Muslims. Out of that, 1.2 billion live in Asia. And out of the Asian, about half the Asian Muslim, little over half the Asian Muslim actually live in South Asia. And South Asia has 3 of the 5 largest Muslim countries, Muslim population, India, Pakistan, after India and Bangladesh. In 2030, according to demographic projections done by the Pew Research Center in Washington, D.C., Pakistan would have the largest Muslim population in the world, and it would be followed by India and then Bangladesh. In fact, Indonesia would have fewer Muslims than Indonesia. The second reason for studying South Asian Islam is the Muslim factor in South Asian cultural, political, economic, and religious fabric. Islamic factor accounts for the very existence of 3 countries, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India. Pakistan and Bangladesh are Muslim majority countries, but India has 14.6% of population as Muslim. They live in all parts of India, but particularly in Assam, they make up 1/3 of the population. In Kerala and in West Bengal, about 1/4. But in addition to that, they in fact they live almost in all other states of India. So Islam is very much part and parcel of the fabric, not only of the main of Bangladesh, Pakistan, but also Sri Lanka and of India. The third reason is the religious, ethnic, and sectarian conflicts. Religious, ethnic, and sectarian conflicts in Pakistan and Bangladesh, India, and Sri Lanka have national, regional, and international repercussions. The trajectory of the Afghanistan war is directly influenced by religious and sectarian factors. The Western strategic interventions in Pakistan and Afghanistan have been constructed on largely contentious and ill-informed notions about Islamic resurgence, which ignored the failure of the national project and its role in Islamic resurgence. And the fourth reason for studying South Asian Islam is the portrayal of Islam and the Muslims in the public discourse. In Islam and Muslims are presented as an undifferentiated mass of people driven mainly by the impulses of Islamic theology. In Western discourse on Islam, and the Western discourse on Islam is dominated by accounts of us and them, war of the words, believers and infidels, conceptions of the Muslim, and similar concepts of the Muslim and the Muslim mind. It is reflected in the widely read works of scholars like Samuel Huntington and Bernard Lewis. And let me just summarize the main points that Bernard Lewis makes in his last 2 books. Muslims the world over are caught up in the resentful mourning over the loss of a cultural primacy that was once theirs and now they have lost. Now has been lost. They are enraged at the West, infidels, modernity, colonialism, secular nationalism for causing this, as well as at themselves for having allowed this to happen. This rage at Muslim failure has led to the rise of fundamentalism, calls to jihad and terrorism, which have become a threat not only to the Muslim world, but to the rest of the world as well. They are enraged at the West, infidels, modernity, colonialism, secular nationalism for causing this, as well as themselves for having allowed this to happen. This rage has led to the rise of fundamentalism, calls to jihad, and terrorism, which have become a threat not only to the West, but to the world and to the whole world. These developments are attributed to the impulses of Muslim theology. We can find the echo of this discourse in the brilliant novel by Pakistani author Mohsen Hamid's The Reluctant Fundamentalism. In this discourse, being Muslim is characterized by fanaticism, anger, resentment, and similar kind of attributes. Such an image is patently wrong, misleading, and mischievous because it ignores the ubiquity of compassion, charity, and common humanity in the ordinary rhythms of Muslim life in South Asia and elsewhere. The aim of this volume that I have great privilege of introducing to you is to counter such stereotypes of Islam and Muslims with empirical evidence. And particularly, I'm hoping the research project, when and if it is established on South Asian Islam at the Institute, would actually do the grounding, empirically grounded work in order to counter such ill-founded stereotypes of Muslims in the Muslim world. How is my book on the book Islam and Society contributes to this debate? I'll make some 4 or 5 general observations and maybe comment on one chapter, and then I will perhaps leave it when we have panel discussion to discuss the various issues further. South Asian Muslims and the Muslim world are politically, socially, and culturally differentiated and heterogeneous. They are not a block universe everywhere the same. Islamic theology, my second point, is that Islamic theology itself is a socially constructed ideology. Consequently, it is not the impulses of theology, but impulses of society which drive and influence social, political, and religious trajectories of South Asian Muslims and Muslims in general. The central focus of the book is to explore and highlight the nexus between the social and cultural milieux in order to conceptualize the sacred as a socially constructed reality and not as a supernatural phenomenon. From this perspective, human agency and society become the main focus for shaping, perpetuating, and institutionalizing religious beliefs and practices, thus opening up space for empirical and objective analysis of religious phenomena. Using this perspective, Islam and Society explores some of the key debates in contemporary sociology of Islam. The topic explored are social factors in the origin of Islam, the knowledge, development, and freedom deficit in the Muslim world, Islam and politics in South Asia, Muslim piety in Southeast and South Asia, anti-Semitism, the social foundation of Muhammad's prophetic mission, and lastly, the barriers of Muslim inclusion when Muslims are in minorities in countries like Singapore and Australia. I'd just like to comment briefly. I'll just give you a brief overview of the chapter 1 and chapter 2, and I'd be delighted to actually respond or comment further on chapters, on the other chapters. There are 7 chapters altogether in the book later on, if there's time. In chapter 1, I examine the debates about social, economic, and cultural factors in the origin of Islam. It is argued that the commercial, urban, and demographic changes created a disjunction between the ideological basis of the social organization of pre-Islamic Meccan society and its functional reality, creating conflict and disruption. Islam arose as a moderating religious and ethical movement under these conditions. This chapter concludes with a discussion of the debates, the contemporary debates about the development, knowledge, and freedom deficit in the Muslim world. In chapter 2, I examine the role of Islam in shaping the political landscape of South Asia. I mean, basically my arguments are as follows. In South Asia, there are two main traditions of Islam. The Sufi Islam, what I call the popular Islam, and a scripturalistic version of Islam, which is basically Islam of the ulama. The popular Islam has been instrumental in the spread of Islam and in shaping the political and cultural landscape. The majority of the South Asian Muslims are actually followers of the Sufi, or what I call the Brailwi version of Islam. And it is the alliance between the leaders of the Brailwi, or the popular Islam, and the political structure that has shaped the political culture of South Asia. And one of the most obvious example of that is you can find now in Pakistan. So, I mean, fundamental point that I want to make, that Islam itself was shaped by the conditions that it found when it arrived in South Asia. It created a version of Islam that was compatible with the temperament, history, and personality of the people of South Asia. It then played a very instrumental role in creating institutions and political structures that have shaped the political, social, and cultural life of South Asian Muslims. And of course, it's a long story, but basically it is now reflected. You can see this evolution of this process in Pakistan. The other chapters deal with a number of other issues. The third chapter deals with Muslim piety, commitment. And in that chapter, I think the central point of the chapter is the Muslim piety. The way Islam is practiced in the world is actually shaped by the political, cultural, and social factors. The piety itself is shaped by the social and cultural factors. A society that to a large extent shapes the way Islam is practiced. And there are two kinds of identities which have emerged as a result of that. Muslim identity based on religiosity, and Muslim identity based on heritage. I'll just give you an example, and I'll stop. I was doing field work in Kazakhstan, and I was talking to a Kazakh male who was introduced to me, and we were having lunch. He was probably having his either pork chop or they're very fond of horse meat, and drinking beer. And I asked him, I'm not sure why, I asked him, what is your religion? He looked at me with such rage. He said, don't you know? I'm a Muslim. And I said, I'm sorry, I said, don't you know? I'm a Kazakh. I'm a Muslim. So the fact that I made such an obvious admission was actually very, it surprised me, and it was upsetting for him and for me. But in any case, the point being, he had no problem in telling me that he was proud to be a Muslim because he was a Kazakh. So the point I want to make is that the Muslim identity, for at least according to my study in 7 Muslim countries, a large proportion of Muslims, between 50 to 60% of Muslims actually construct their Muslim identity because they're born into a Muslim family, into a Muslim country, or into a Muslim society. And about 1/3 of Muslims actually construct their identity because they practice Islam. The irony is that in Muslim society, modern Muslim societies, societies actually only acknowledge a privileged identity which is grounded in Islam, as if all Muslims are actually practicing Muslims. And what I hope we will see in years to come, that this Muslim societies will allow both identities to nourish, to find nourishment and expression in society. So that is one of the point of the chapter. Anti-Semitism chapter, and then on the Prophet and the Muhammad's prophetic mission, and finally Muslim minorities are the other parts of the book. I think I will conclude now, and I would be happy to actually take up some of the points later on when we have panel discussion. I don't want to be into the panel discussion time. Thank you very much.